Yeah, we're live. Let's see if we can get some, get some light on the subject. What's up? We are here. It's instead of 7 o'clock, it's 8 o'clock. We're starting an hour late, which is very cool. It's a Saturday night. Hopefully, you guys are having fun. What I want to do tonight is we're going to talk about. I'm having a on the channel. I actually having a little resurgence of the Boss 302, the age-old Boss 302 versus the DZ 302, the Chevy DZ 302. And it's interesting that this is becoming like so popular again. I mean, when I first did the video almost a year back now, it was very popular and everybody loved it because I mean, we all love the like Trans Am series. In my opinion, that was kind of the highlight of the of that Trans Am racing. You could actually recognize the cars as when guys were racing a Boss 302. It looked like a Boss 302 when they're racing a 68 or 67 or 69 Camaro. It actually looked like a Camaro. So it was cool to be identify those. And now, I love the Trans Am racing. I mean, I was around World Challenge driving stuff when Boris said and Simo and Tommy Kendall and all these guys, all of these great drivers, they were driving Trans Am, and those were Trans Am cars, but they were tube chassis cars and stuff, and they were much more advanced than the stuff that they were running back in the late 60s and early 70s. So that's kind of the highlight of the stuff. And also, and a lot of people don't realize that because we always tend to focus on the Camaro and the Mustang and the Javelins and all that stuff, but they were racing like under 2-liter chassis too. So those guys were fighting it out. The BRE guys, and I think that the guys that they were fighting out with were the Alpha guys. So it was that was a really, really tightly fought Trans Am Series 2 in the under 2-liter stuff. So that was kind of cool. But the question is, and the reason that I'm bringing this up is because once again, this, for whatever reason, I don't know if YouTube decided that they wanted this to happen, but it has become popular again. And this video is actually getting a lot of growth right now, and it's getting a lot of attention. But the interesting thing is, when I'm reading these comments, I hear these arguments. Like in the video, I just say, look, when we ran a Boss 302 and here's what I did to try to replicate it. I obviously couldn't go back in my Wayback Machine with Peabody and Sherman and grab a Boss 302 from the assembly line and put it on the dyno and do the same thing with a DZ 302 and run that to see how it worked, because we're building basically replicas of them, and some of the parts were not available. Like we ran them with 750 Hollies, and they didn't come with that. So there are a few things that are changed, but I think it gives us a pretty good idea. And the whole idea was because for years and years, people have been saying, oh, well, this, that little 302 is rated at 290, but it actually made 400. Well, the reality is that didn't make anywhere near 400. It would have made 400 in a trim that they raced it in, but that wasn't a stock motor. That was a very much modified motor. In fact, that they probably made more than that. They probably were closer to, I'm guessing they were probably closer to 450. And if you talk to some of the guys that built those, like we have, it's pretty cool to hear what those guys did. And the interesting thing is, I got to talk to one of these guys the other day, like I said, it was a year ago maybe, at West Tech. And I was talking to him about, because one of the tests people wanted me to do is they wanted me to do the cross ram on the DZ 302. And I was telling him that I didn't think that was a very good choice, but he said they actually get it to work very well. So it takes some work, but they actually get it to perform pretty well. And I was told, all the time that, hey, a single 4-barrel is definitely the way to go. Single 4-barrel dual plane carburetor, like you would do on almost every combination. But he said that the cross ram works cool. And if I had a DZ 302, if I had DZ 302 money and I had one of those 69 Z28s, it would definitely have that on there because it's really, really cool. Even if it didn't, we could make it run well, but even if it didn't run well, it would always have that because that's really cool. But then the question is, like, in that comparison, we see that basically the situation is with the Chevy, it has a not very good cylinder head, but a lot of camshaft. And on the Boss side, it has lots of cylinder head and a very mild camshaft. So they went about achieving their goals, at least for the production motors, in different ways. Now there's no cylinder head made by Chevrolet until we get into the LS stuff. And then actually until we get into the LS3 stuff, that flows what a Boss head flows. I've tested a number of different 4-valve or 4V, a bunch of 4V Boss heads, and Cleveland heads, and they all were flowing about 273 to 275 or so. So that's a lot of airflow from that head. And we know that it was big and everything. And the reason I want to test it is I don't care which one wins. I mean, I had no vested interest in it. And guys were making comments to that. Oh yeah, you must be a Ford guy, and or I must be a Chevy guy, depending on what side that they were on and which side they wanted me to be on. But the reality is that's what's nice about the dyno is the dyno just tells you what happens and what doesn't happen. But one of the reasons that I wanted to test these is forever people have, and I'm sure I'm guilty of saying it too, forever people have been saying, oh, that Boss 302, the heads are way too big on 302. It just doesn't make any torque. And when you run them at wide open throttle and you compare them on the dyno, that's actually not the reality. And the reason for that is there are a couple of reasons. One, it has a reasonable amount of compression. It doesn't have as much as the DZ302 did, but it does have a dual plane intake, which is the design is noted for making good, like low speed torque. It also has a mild camshaft on the Boss compared to the DZ302. So it has two things going for it and then lots of head flow that would make it want to produce low speed power. I know that it has head flow and a big port and a big valve. Those go against that, but it has 2 out of the 3. So if you look at the torque curves on those two motors, what I expected going in based on what everybody had been saying for years about the Boss motors is that, oh, it just kills low speed power. But that's not what happened on the dyno. So it's interesting I guarantee you that if you go online and you say that Boss 302 actually makes pretty good low speed power compared to a DZ 302, you will get laughed off of whatever group chat you're in, because everybody will tell you, because the internet level of logic will tell you that that's not the case. Even when you show them these graphs and show, look, this is what happened. I'm not giving you a subjective opinion about whether or not it made torque. I'm just telling you at 3,000 RPM, it did this, and the DZ302 did this. And the reason that the DZ302 would be soft down low relative to what it could be is that it had a really big camshaft in it, and a really big camshaft with lots of duration. It didn't have very much lift, but it had over 250 degrees of duration at 50 on a 302-inch motor. I mean, you would almost never put that kind of camshaft, for instance, if you were building a 5-liter Ford, a modern one, not a Coyote, but the one in between that started the new Ford Revolution. You would never put a camshaft that big, not in any sort of like stock motor, but yet Chevrolet had one of those in their 67, 68, and 69 DZ302s. That's why that they were, if anything, a little soft, and why guys put 4 series and 5 series gears in those things to get them to rev, so because they didn't make a lot of torque. But one thing that they did do, if you look at the videos I have up comparing the 302 and the 327 and the 350, they all made about the same peak power. So if you keep the RPMs up in a 302, it would run really well. It's not going to have the low speed torque that the other motors did. And so if you did, if you were just mashing the throttle out on the street or whatever, if you were actually doing drag racing where you could dump the clutch at the right RPM and shift at the right RPM, they would do fairly well, but they wanted a lot of gear in them. And the same thing with the Boss 302, Ford put limiters on them from the factory to stop people from revving them, but they do like RPM, despite the fact that they have a fairly small camshaft in them and a dual plane intake. They do like to rev, they make good power out at the top, and that the only thing better than a Boss 302 is actually a Boss 351, because the bigger displacement can and did take advantage of all of that airflow. And in fact, if you look at all the small blocks that I've run so far, the Boss 351 makes the most power. It made quite a bit more peak power. It made 10 or 12 more, I think, if I remember right, than the Boss 302 did. But it made a lot of torque too, relatively speaking, compared to the Boss 302. And it made more power than any of the Chevrolets, the LT1 or the L76 or L84 or DZ302. It made more than any of those. So it really is the high water mark. The only thing we have left to test now, I don't know, maybe an AMC, but the Dodge, the 340 6-pack, we'll have to try one of those and see how that compares. But I honestly don't think that given the head flow that the Dodge 340 had and the camshaft that it had, that combination, the 6-pack might help it with flow. but I just don't think it has what it would take to beat the Boss stuff because they have such really good head flow. I mean, when you have it one head from Chevrolet that flows 205 or 210 and a Boss head flows 275, that's really pretty hard to get past. It's hard to cam it past that. It's hard to make, and they rated them the same at 290 horsepower from the factory. But we know that they could make more than that, especially if you put headers and a tune on them like guys did back in the day. So that's what's going on now. The 69 Boss 302 factory Trans Am cars ran two 1050 Dominators. Wow, they ran a dual quad intake with two 1050s. That seems like a lot. Admiral, I'm sketching a custom head right now. Nice. Australia's in the house. What's your recommendation for a 5.3 LS cam? I want the horsepower, but don't want to sacrifice much down low. Currently, AFM deleted Gen 4 with comp low lift. Tell me what the duration specs are, Chasen, on that comp low lift cam. Lumbee Warrior would like to see a Boss 302 stroke to 347. Some guys have run those at West Tech, and they've even run them with, which was very, very cool, the Cross Boss intake and the Autolite inline carburetor, which worked very well and made very, very good power. And plus, it's a Cross Boss intake manifold, so it's really cool. Thank you, Kevin. What's up? Oh, Saturday night, just time to enjoy a frosty cold beverage. Tim, you'll be happy to know I actually just had pizza. I had two slices. It's pizza night tonight because it's hopefully it's going to be movie night too after I get done talking to you guys. Let's see. Any news on the Vortec? I haven't been down to West Tech yet, so I need to get down there. The 440 has dump truck cylinder heads. I talk to people about the 440, and I get people tell me, oh yeah, the 440 was those things made more power than anything. I'm thinking, how do you think that that's possible? Because I've flow tested 440 heads, and they're like a decent small block head. they're not anywhere near what a big block head is. A DZ302 all day. Yeah, and I get comments like, and the funny thing, and that's kind of where I was going before I got off on a tangent. I was looking at the comments in the Boss 302 and DZ302 because I post them both in the Chevy groups and in the Ford groups. And it's just interesting to see the difference of the comments that you get. And I'm going to read you a comment that's not related to that, but it's one of my favorite comments. It's actually a comment I got back when I was at Brian Tooley Racing. We were doing the testing back there. I showed Brian. He laughed. It's really funny. But on the DZ302 versus the Boss 302, the comments are interesting because you'll have people, and I'm not sure if they watched the video or not. I hope that they did, and they're actually looking at the data to figure out what they would argue about. Like they may argue, well, the DZ made more torque at 3,700 RPM or whatever the number is. But they don't do that. They say, oh, the Chevy, like I get guys that say, oh, the Chevy's dominated Trans Am racing. And I'm like, well, that's actually not true. Ford won in 67 and 70, and Chevy won in 68 and 69. So there's no dominance there. They both did well. And all of those were very hard fought too. It's not like somebody just walked away with it. And then they tell me about how the Gap Roush one was the best motor that was ever built, not giving any power numbers or not comparing it to anything else. And the same thing with the Chevrolet stuff. Oh, Chevrolets are in general, all Chevrolets apparently are way, will walk away from a Ford. And then we get the thing that the Fords don't make any torque. And all of these like things where, or a guy will tell me, I had both of them, I drove both of them, and the Chevy was a lot faster. Well, first of all, you couldn't have been in both of them and raced yourself. And then the other thing is you have variations between the cars. Like some of them could have 4 series gears and 3 series gears, 4 speeds and automatics and air conditioning and just all kinds of things that change what it would be. Not to mention the fact that it's just a subjective opinion. I feel like this was the way that it should be, not when I actually did a back-to-back drag race test, let's say, from back in the day. Because even then, Chevrolet and other people had been known to give magazine guys ringers that were, you know, a little better tuned than others. And sure, you should. I mean, if you're going to put your best foot forward, you might as well put your best foot forward. And if you're letting magazine guys drive your car anyway that are just going to beat on it, why don't you make it so that it runs a little better? Why don't you put the tune on it, you know, put some timing in it, tighten the lash up, put some jet in it, you know, put some headers on it, make it work. So, and I want to look up this comment because I want to read it to you guys. I took a picture of it, I thought. Let's see here. Let's see if I can find that. I should have looked that up before I got on here. Lots of pictures of me holding moonshine bottles, though. So let's see here. No, that's not it. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is one of my favorite comments that somebody's ever made. He says, "You have interesting things to say, great stuff, but please stop trying to be funny. It really sucks." How awesome is that? That's like perfect. So I can no longer be funny, you guys. Okay, what do we got? What we got? Yeah, 440 heads are like the E7 heads of the small block Ford. Yeah, they're not quite that bad, but they are not I mean, they're comparable to like a good small block head, but not like a big block head though. James said he's starting to like the Gen 5 stuff. The tuning on the factory ECM and TCM is challenging. Can't wait until larger injectors and high pressure pumps are available. Yeah, but you know, James, what's going to happen is even if they become available, they're going to be pretty pricey though, because I don't know that there's any way to make them not pricey. And if they come from offshore, I don't know if you want a real high pressure injector. That's not going to work. I would be a little suspect there. Would a Ford Z-Cam perform well on a 347 Victor Jr. head and Victor Jr. intake with a 750 carb? I don't know how much power that's going to make. The Victor Jr. head, I mean, the Victor Jr. cylinder heads, yeah, are not great. They're okay. But on a 347 with that Z, I honestly, I can't even remember what the specs are on the Z-Cam. I remember testing all of the Alphabet cams, including that one. It came later. I'm thinking that's going to be in the 440 to 450 range, probably. Almost Racing. No, I did not ask Brian yet on that swirl vane. You should do a D-stroked 305. So how much do you want me to take out of the 305? So you want to put a 302 or a 283 crank in a 305 and then have a small bore and a small stroke? What is the LSA on the BTR L83 stage 4 cam? I don't know. My 76-year-old dad mentioned last week that the Cleveland heads were the best ever. I sent him a link to the videos. Thank you very much. And I agree. There's no other small block head that came close to flowing what that thing flowed. ICT car guy, how did you end up in this business? I told that story on one of the things. It kind of happened by accident. I wrote a story for Kip at Turbo Magazine because I was out at the Silver State and a guy interviewed me and I called and asked about it and ended up writing a story for Turbo Magazine on that race and then went off in that direction. Let's see. Chase, and I was asking your recommendation for my truck. I feel like Comp didn't do a whole lot, but I also want to get a Terminator or equal, and also thinking about a torque converter. I don't know about a torque converter. If you're running a truck, I would recommend you get a small truck cam. It's a 4.8 or 5.3. I would recommend you getting a stage 1. If it's a 6.0, you can go to a stage 2. If it's a Gen 5, then you could get a stage 2 in that as well. None of those you should need a converter for. If you go up into the bigger stages, especially with the smaller motors, then you'll need a different converter. Do you have any tips on passing emissions with straight turbo exhaust? I don't know. We don't do emissions testing there, so I'm not sure it could be much help. Are you a mechanic? I don't know what you mean by that. I'm not a professional mechanic. Like, I don't work at a shop. I build all the motors that I test, and I do all of the head swaps, and I do the tuning, and then I do all the intake swaps, and do all the turbo stuff. And so you could make your own decision. When you do, other guys recommended a 390 FE. I do want to do a 390 FE, and a Pontiac straight six would be cool, the sprint motor. And really, the Pontiac, the 4-cylinder version of that would be kind of even cooler, but they're really hard to come by. My first automotive job, I think, would have been, I was working for Motorola installing their radio and communications equipment in police cars, and like we got to install them in armored cars and stuff like that. That was kind of cool. Big bang on an AMC. What I really want to do a big bang on is there's a lot of them. We want to do the 3800, the 4200, and then I also would like to do it on the L83. A manual 5-speed in my Crown Vic, that would be cool. Yes, half fast. If you put a 3-inch stroke crank in there, that's what it would be. No, that's not right? Yeah, that is a 3-inch. Yeah, if you put a 3-inch stroke crank in it, it would be like the L99. Yeah, James, that's real money for stuff, for injectors. Did Ford ever take advantage of roller cams back then? Back when they were running the Boss stuff? Javier, I don't know who that's directed to. Explain to me about an 8.2 deck. I don't know what you, I don't know what your question is. Australia's in the house, just sitting down after taking my Resto Project 65 Pontiac GTO. Nice. Out for its first trip around the block under its own power, 1990. Feeling pretty pumped. That's good. Tell me, Watson, tell me about what the motor is. What's the best classic and modern V8? I can't answer that. I would have my own views, but you have your own, and you should. Yours shouldn't necessarily be what mine are. I like lots of different cars. I mean, I have a big variety of different types of cars that I like. I like imports and domestics and trucks and all kinds of crazy stuff. I always go back to the weird Nash Metropolitan because I think it's awesome. I definitely want one of those. But I like the Omni GLH. There's a lot of weird things I like. I really would like a BMW Isetta, but it's just not, none of them are practical. Cliff, if you had a 67, 68, or 69 Z28 and you had a 410 gear, first gear was almost useless. Although it did get the car going, what you needed was either a bigger tire, which guys did in there, or the factory gear would have been a 373. John, yeah, I don't know. I've never heard about the spinning #1 rod bearing. If there was an oiling problem, I mean, it's just a Windsor. It's just a 302 Windsor bottom end. Mark, you guys made some 4200 power tonight? Daryl, the Buick 350 would be good. I want to finish this 455 before I could do that. Yeah, I half-assed. I agree. If the 301 Pontiac Turbo, even though it's a later one, would still be kind of cool. Let's see. 4200 power. Where did you go? Okay, black truck. Used to test the MS4 Pro. Got a new intercooler today. Cool. Is it a bigger air-to-air or something? Humdum. I've never tried the cryogenic stuff. I had some people contacting me about it and we're talking about doing some stuff, but I've never tried it, so I can't really tell you. Alternator on the diesel time. Dude, you're Roswell in the house? That's where my Mustang is. Roswell has a Firebird with an overhead cam L6. Those are cool. Jim, on your 4.62 valve, what we did was put ported heads in the cam. I would, if I was driving it around, I'd put a smaller cam than that 274 cam that I put in my Mustang. I put the 262 cam, ported heads. I'd use the stock PI intake, and then you should put boost on it. 1600 for a Nash Metro. The thing that I don't want is a Nash Metropolitan Project, though. I want a running one that just I can drive around in. I'd rather just spend the money on it now. I just don't have time to do a whole bunch of different projects. I already have a Nova back here that I need to do. No, we're buttoned. We're buttoned. We're looking good. Yeah, we're classing it up a little bit. Oh, 2.5 times more area in the air-to-air. That's good. Let me know if you are you measuring charge temps, Mark, when you're doing your turbo stuff. If you get a change in it, let me know. Mr. the Bandit, I would put boost on a stock PI. As a matter of fact, I have that video up where we boosted a stock PI, and I did it for Freiburger at, I think we did it for Hot Rod way back in the day. We just got one from a wrecking yard and put bigger injectors in it and then added boost and an intercooler to it. It worked good. Chase, and I don't, the most user-friendly fuel management system is we use a Holley HP. That's the only one that I know of. And I've also used Fast, but that's more because they have it at West Tech. I haven't run all of them, so I don't know anything about them. And for me, as long as it will give me the air fuel and the timing that I want, then that's all I'm asking of it. So you're at the 50th anniversary Igniter Nitro Funny Car race today, and yes, those things make insane horsepower. Have you done any work on a Ford Model A 4-cylinder? No, but the gentleman that let me use the intake manifold, and he has and gave me the Slant 6 and the 347 Pontiac. He has racing versions of those that he's going to let me run, which will be very, very, very cool. What's your opinion on doing a 4-bolt main conversion on a 69302 block? I don't think you need the 4-bolt main conversion for the power level that most people would be running that block at. Ask your friend at Engine Masters for a 340 power DW2 head. I don't know what that is. I don't, Anthony, I don't have an OnlyFans page or whatever that is. JNL, I know where there's a cool old 390 power Galaxy. That's very cool. You can have 2 Fords sitting there. Nice. I know, 31 thumbs up on 152. Now we're at 62 on 180. It's all about like the third ratio. The LT5, if you're talking about the ZR1 motor, that's Westex, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to run it. Although I have really nothing to do with that other than I'll be there and help them. advantages to a Windsor block with a Cleveland head. There are, I mean, a Boss 302 has an advantage over a stock DZ 302 because it flows a lot more. But if you're building a motor right now, that's not the direction that I would choose to go. I would go with the Windsor head because there's just so many good ones out there. You can make more power than you need to without going to a Cleveland head. And there's probably, with the Windsors, there's probably more intake manifolds than there are 302 Clevor based intake manifolds to choose from. GT40P heads are, I have videos up on what they do and then all the other heads too. So if you, that's a low dollar head and it works pretty well because it came from a wrecking yard, but it's not anywhere near what any of the good aluminum heads will do. But it doesn't cost what they do either. So Kevin, you're bringing the 50 Dodge out to the Lemons, Colorado. What track do you guys race on out there? I remember testing the Crane Fireball heads. I think that those were actually Dart heads. Dart or World Product. Somebody cast those for those guys. Half fast. That's one of the things I would do on that 301. He's saying it'd be neat to do the 301 Pontiac and change it over from a blow through instead of a draw through. And you could definitely make more power by doing that. And it'd be interesting to measure the charge temperatures too. Obviously, I would want to run it the way that it is first, just because it is a draw through and it's awesome. But it would be kind of cool to change it over and see what power you could make. So whoever was talking to me about the 301 turbo, please hit me up. Here's my email address so we can get together maybe. And I take that back. That's not all caps. AOL.com. Yep. Let's try that again. There we go. What do you choose, Clevor or the Windsor with GT40P head? A Tanny. Then I would definitely pick a Cleveland head over a GT40P head. My thoughts on the Trickle 11R205 heads are they are awesome. Olds, Buick, or Pontiac engines would be cool on the 5.0 or 5.7. I agree. Gee, Coates, I always thought the DZ was better. Again, that depends. If you're a Z28 guy, then you should think that and you should like that better. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it, obviously tested the way that we tested it. The Boss head makes more power. That doesn't mean that the DZ302 isn't good or that I wouldn't love to have a 69 Z28 or a 69 or 70 Boss 302 for that matter. But I would also like a TA 6-pack or an AAR CUDA. I mean, all of those would be awesome. .301 turbo is a disaster. I know, but that's my middle name. Trick Flow Twisted Wedge or Dart Pro 1 on a 347. Both of those heads will make more than enough power for what you're doing on the 347. The 11R head is a really good choice for that. And Dart Pro 1 stuff is really good also. So, Jonathan, you said it's not the stroke of the engine that limits RPM. What limits max RPM, and how do you know where to set the rev limiter at? Well, when we dyno test it, we know we keep going till it stops making, till we get past peak power. So the power curve will go up, and then it will fall off, and then we know, okay, that's as high as we need to rev it. We're not going to rev it too far past the power peak. You can if you want, and a lot of guys do that because they want to shift at the right point that's past the power peak. So you have the greatest average, if the power curve goes like this, you want to shift here so that you have this amount and this amount and then all this stuff up here. But otherwise, the thing that limits RPM is usually the valve train. It's usually the ramp rate in the cam causes instability, the valve spring pressure, and how you set the springs up, the weight of the rockers and that sort of thing. That's what usually limits it. The short block part of it usually will keep will run more RPM. Toasty, why do we have to choose just one of those? I mean, you should do all of them, right? No, nitrous works really well. It's really cheap on a carbureted deal. Turbo obviously is good. I ran a supercharged Vortec on mine for years and years and years, including running it out at the Silver State and stuff. It worked great. And if you take a 302 and make it a 347, it will be better. It will be better everywhere. So there's no wrong answer there. Let's see. I've been wondering what cam to run on a small block Ford with dual 400 carburetors and GT40 heads. GT40 heads. So you have a dual quad intake GT40 heads. And is it a 302 or 289? That Extreme Energy 274 cam is always the cam that I recommend. You might want to go down one step from that cam shaft on that combination. It's a 264 or 266. Please test the slow leak down lifters. Are you talking about the Rhodes lifters? Mark, I'll ask him about that motor too. The 302 Jimmy. Super Killer, there's no way that they ran DZ302s at 10,000 RPM, at least not stock ones. The valve train won't run at that RPM, not even close. If they were running that RPM, they were doing it with major overhauls to lots of stuff. I don't know. I've never heard of a slow leak lifter. I've heard of short travel lifters, and I've heard of the Rhodes lifters too, but I don't know what a slow leak lifter is. Tony, the guys at Westech I thought had a set of those 292s, but I've never tested them though. The TrickFlow Stage 1 cam, I've run that quite a few times. It works good. Yeah, Rob, that's too bad. It would be good to have one, but if it's got water in it, then it's a lot of times they're throwaways after that. The valve area to displacement has no effect. It affects high RPM power, but it has no effect on the ability to rev. It will help determine where the thing makes power, just like what cam timing does in the intake manifold design. But if you don't have a valve train that will let you run up to take advantage of those things, then they won't do anything. What do you think of a Comp 270 at 2-valve 4.6? It's a pretty good size cam. Take a look at the video that I have up. You can see exactly what it does compared to a stock cam. John, I don't think that the bore and stroke would have a dramatic effect on that. I think it might have some, because I think that the 4-inch bore might be a little bit better there, but the 307 has more displacement, so it would be an interesting comparison. I think if we ran both of them, if we ran them, the 307 and the 302, with the stuff that came with the 302, like that camshaft and that compression and that intake and that carburetor, I think the 307 might make more power. Code Man, I would like to run that inline 5 and the inline 4 version of the Atlas motor, but we'll have to get the 6-cylinder going first. Mike, they had cams that went to 10,000 because the guys used to run the bigger bore versions of the 283s. They'd make 301s out of them, and guys in drag racing with solid cams were running them out there. I don't know how much power that they were making, because the thing that would have limited them making power back then there weren't an abundance of big enough cylinder heads. Daniel, the bore and the stroke are not they are not going to be what makes it able to run at 11,000 RPM. Yeah, Alexandra, you have to that's why I hate working on trucks too, unless you could climb into the engine compartment. It's sometimes hard to lean over that stuff. Anthony, I don't have a specific number for when you would need to change over. High Plains Raceway. I'll have to look that up. I'm not familiar with that. Johnson has a limited travel tight clearance lifter, which is considered a slow leak. Okay, I just have never heard that phrase before. Mike, I agree that Trick Flow track heat kit works good. I've tested that before. Yeah, James, that's a good point. The reason that I built the Boss 302 and the DZ 302 was not because I thought the 302 was the best displacement, because it's not. If you want to make power, make it bigger than that. It's so much easier to get more power if the motor's bigger. If I put the same components on 351 as I did a 302, the 351 is going to make more power. It's going to have a lot more torque. I mean, we saw that in the 302 versus 327 versus 350, and we also saw it in a 4.8 versus 5.3 and a 6.0. The 6-liter just, is bigger and it makes more power. It's a lot easier to do that. The only reason to pick a smaller displacement is because you're class limited, or you're building it for a 69 Z28 or something, or a Boss 302. Yes, you can run bearing spacers. As a matter of fact, I think we may have done that. I can't remember if we had to do that on the 327 or the 302. We did it on one of them because I think maybe we used a 283 crank in that or something. Man, it's been a long time since I ran that. Daniels, that's a lot of work on a 292, but I bet it worked out pretty well when that's all you could do. Joe, if you're wanting 400 horsepower, the GT40 head's not going to get you there. You're going to have to port it, and you're going to have somebody who knows what they're doing to do it. Rhiannon, you might be right about the 307. The problem with the small bore stuff is there are not cylinder heads available for that. And I don't know how well the Fuelie head's going to be limiting anyway. I wonder if, I don't know if we could even run a 202 valve on that 307 unless we notch the top of the piston, which we've done on 305s before. It would surprise me if you look at it. Somebody half-fast is asking about hydraulic rollers versus solid rollers, and if you look at it, if you run the same cam and keep the same cam in it and only change the lifters, like the guys from Engine Masters is, Steve's Brule is a big proponent of this. If you put a solid lifter in, and you can run into problems with the hydraulic roller lifter depressing, and you can run into valve float because it's heavier. So you can cure some problems that are inherent with that hydraulic roller, and then you can cure that with a solid. So he likes doing that, especially on big block Chevys. But I don't know about a short travel lifter. I don't know if that would help it. It might. I know that when we did the test on the push rod length on the LS, that's one of the things that we did basically by putting the longer push rod in there. We effectively made the factory lifter a short travel lifter by compressing it a lot and getting rid of a lot of that aerated oil in the lifter. So it made that lifter act more like a solid roller than a hydraulic roller. And that's what they're trying to do. It just, if anything, it makes what's happening in the engine much more consistent, so that you don't have the thing like bleeding down. And this gets really problematic on very high ramp rate camshafts. Yes, everyone hit the like button. The problem with running solids is that there are not a lot of good solids that work well for a daily driver. They run into oiling problems, and then the wheels go bad and stuff. So it doesn't work as well as a hydraulic for a daily driver. Oh, Daniel, no, don't worry about it, man. You can say whatever you want. I'm just saying that the putting a lot of work into the 292, that's cool. And a lot of guys did it back in the day before Brownfield, which eventually became AFR, came out with the setups, and then it came up with the aluminum heads basically, so the guys could actually make some power. Although I listened to stories told by Brule and Rick, the guys at West Tech, and about how porous they were and how they went through a lot of iterations before they finally got the aluminum castings right. Yeah, the GT40P heads are problematic from plug accessibility and burning plug wires and working with different headers. The GT40 head is a much better choice. That's usually the ones that we look for in the wrecking yard. B Doyle, that's been tested a couple of times, and in the range that we're talking about for most of these street motors, the displacement determines what the power output and the power curve looks like. I know when Freiberger tested that there wasn't a big change in what the curves look like from those two combinations. Yeah, James, I wanted to put a 351 in mine for a long time, and I still don't have an engine an engine back in mine. Kevin, does anybody know what the AMC heads flow like for a 304 or a 401 or a 360? John, the 350 LT1 that came out in 1970 had a different camshaft. It was 11-to-1, had the same heads, had a dual plane intake, had the same carburetor, and it did have more displacement. If you look at the video that I put up, I go over all of that stuff. I did the 302 and the 327, which is an L76 or an L84. 365 horse or 375 horse, depending on which version you got. They're the same ones, just one was fuel injected and one was carbureted. And then also the 1970 LT1 350, which for me is kind of my favorite one, only because my first car was a 1970 and a half split bumper Camaro. Mine was a 2-barrel base model version. It was not a Z28, but that just made me want the Z28 version even more. John, I don't know. I've never tried putting it on. I don't ever remember even putting together a 307. Maybe I should, right? J&L, you can put solid rollers in anything as long as you have enough spring rate. Chris, about 7.5 inch push rod. You say it takes 2 1/8 turns, which is outside the safe range. Have you rethought that? The safe range is the range where it doesn't hang the valve open. So some of them might be more than others, and a lot of that's going to depend on what oil you're using and the pressure and that stuff and how the lifter's operating. But if you tighten it up, if you hang the valve open, the motor won't run. So you'll know right away. Yeah, Philip, I'm in that sense, I'm definitely not a mechanic. Like I would never go work on cars. Working on the engine dyno is way easier than leaning over fixing stuff. That's not me. Can you build a high compression engine and just change out fuel types? We've done fuel type tests, and the guys at Engine Masters did one too, and it's interesting to see what the change in power is. But it wouldn't be a big bang unless you wanted us to also add boost to it. Raffle, I guess, is it bad to run a turbo on a 347 stroker with flat top piston 9.6 to 1 compression? No, you're fine. So, Mike, you're not saying a 325 horse 305 was running 10s, right? It was on motor. So you're saying that he did that with he was hit the juice too. I want to give love to the J302. Good heads back in the day. How about that 3-1 Pontiac? That guy wants to give you a 2-to-1 rod ratio. How long is the Pontiac rod? Can you just replace hydraulic roller lifters with solid lifters? That's what they did on the big block. You're gonna have to change the push rod length too, because I think that the solid lifter is going to be a different depth than the hydraulic lifter is. Oh, and you already said that. And you do not have to change the cam. You can just do the lifter change on the same camshaft. And we've done that a lot. Build a 305 with DZ 302 parts. That would be a terrible combination. It's an awful camshaft. .3 liter gas. So like a 429, that's what Mark Sanchez put in his. Daniel, yeah, Brian's a great guy. I know Evan really well because I did a bunch of stuff with Evan and Jim Camposano when I was doing the stuff for Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forwards. I don't know if I've ever met Brian, but yeah, he's a talented guy and seems to be a good guy. Yep, the lash ramps do differ between hydraulic and solid. Yeah, I looked through the Speedomotive catalog a lot and the PAW one. I have seen the Datsun limousine motor, but I didn't know it was based on anything else. That's the first time I've heard that. What's your biggest dyno disappointment? My biggest dyno disappointment so far, I think, is, or at least the first one that comes to mind, is the L99, the little 4.3 liter. It just didn't ever seem to really make any power, and I think it should have. I think it should have made more. It eventually hurt itself, and I still haven't taken it apart yet, but I want to, and hopefully we'll be able to cure that. Yeah, what Brule normally does is on the solid rollers, they'll run a tight lash. The number of turns, you're talking about the number of turns in the reverse that I am, Chris. What I'm talking about is the number of turns once you finger tighten this thing to zero lash. So zero lash is when the rocker is contacting the push rod and the push rod's contacting the lifter, and also the rocker is also has just touched the valve tip. So when you get zero lash there, then it's the number of turns to tighten it that will determine what the push rod length is, whether it works or not. You're talking about going the other way. What we did was we just tried different push rod lengths. And then if you get up to after zero lash, if you get up into the 2-turn range, you're getting into the danger zone. If it takes 3 turns to tighten that, the thing's not going to run. You're definitely going to hang the valve open when this thing starts up and has oil pressure. That's the audience. I mean, the audience determines whether or not they give, which ones they give love to. Thanks. Where is he? Is it Kevin? Let's see. Yeah, Kevin, you sent me an email about the lemons race. Cool. They still sell the 334 stroker kits for the 305. Yeah, and if Chris, if you're still asking about how to set that, 2 turns is not where you want to be. We would like a quarter of a turn would be okay, half turn would be okay, a full turn is okay, and that's probably about where you'll be on a stock one. But anywhere you don't want it to be loose, so a quarter turn would kind of be the minimum, and then half turn's fine. A short travel lifter should have benefit at 7,000 RPM. They say the small block Chevy block is good for 800. We know it will do more than that. We've done lots more than that. Richard, max limit on a 302 Windsor. People say 500 horsepower. Is any truth to that? Would cementing the block do anything? Bro, we've done lots more than 500 horsepower, so that's not the limit. I've ridden in what was at the time the world's fastest Pontiac Fiero. A GTB 3.8. Cool. Cheap big block Chevy power. That's always good. I do like those little Fiat 1.3 multi-air motors. Those would be cool, but I obviously don't have one, and we don't have a way to hook it up other than having it be in the car and running it on the chassis dyno. Oh, Daniel, so that 301 has a 6-inch rod and a 3-inch stroke. Remember what I talked to you about rod ratios? Daniel Speed, one thing that helped the DZ302 a lot for us was tightening the lash up. It didn't like to run at 30,000 slash. The only ones worth building are 400 and a 383. There's lots of good small blocks. They're all good. Every motor that I see in the wrecking yard, I want to bring home. Somebody just sent me a picture of an L83, which is one less than an L84, is the crossfire injection on the early Corvette and the Camaros, early 84 and 83, and then on the Z28 stuff too. I would like to run that just because I think it would be cool. Any recommendations on setting up a carb mechanical pump car? Is it a mechanical pump for a turbo application, or is it just a regular mechanical pump for a daily driver kind of thing? Rhiannon, 301 had such a long rod of forged bore, you might be able to do something with one of them. I don't think the rod ratio is going to determine whether that thing is going to work. I think it's going to be something else. I think it's probably going to be the head flow or the head gaskets. I don't know how good those cylinder heads flow on the 301. I don't know how well everything seals with that turbo. I mean, the thing doesn't makes hardly any power. Does anybody know what size turbo that is on the 301? Yeah, Matt does have a wiki. Patrick has a 301 in his collection. Nice. Is there a year range of the best 302 long block? Are you talking about a 302 Ford? So you just want an in the block mechanical pump to put in there? Yeah, there were two of them. They used the throttle bodies, the single opening throttle bodies, but there was a pair of them. And if you look inside, it is a fairly cool cross ram. So you could change the lid and make it into something better, because the opening in the lids are not very big. The throttle bodies themselves are not very big. The amount of fuel that they can supply is also limited by the injector size. And there are minor upgrades for all of that, but it needs an overhaul. Basically, you need to start from the lower manifold and port the lower manifold. And then I would want to do some things to the runners in it also. And then you'd want to change the lid and maybe put a cross ram lid style from a DZ302, for instance, that has bigger openings that you could really make power to. And then since you have two of them, you might as well put at least two 2-barrel throttle bodies, but maybe two 4-barrel throttle bodies, and then make it port injection, but space the injectors like to where they're at the end of the port, and then boost going to each one of those throttle bodies. That would kind of be an awesome thing, huh? When you did the Big Bang motor, please explain your fuel delivery setup. If you're talking about the LS stuff, we just have a giant, an Aeromotive brushless pump and a Kenny Bell boosted pump and an Aeromotive regulator and filter. And we ran we split the lines off of the regulator, and so we ran it into both sides of the rail. We had 160-pound injectors on it, and we ran it on race gas and not E85. So we had more than enough fuel for what we were doing. Daniels, we're building an LT1 base 302 and then also an LT1 base 305 by swapping the crank and rods and pistons, swapping the stuff over in the L99 and the LT1. So we'll make a 302 out of the LT1 and then a 305 out of the L99. So Patrick, did you have a naturally aspirated 301 in there? I'm not sure about the push rod length. I think that the stock push rods and rockers will actually work on that, Swedish Sugar. Any plans for a Buick 3.8? We're doing the 3800, but not the previous generation one. 2 more minutes. Can the 301 not run the other Pontiac heads? Like you can't put Edelbrock heads on that? So it's like my 347 that I can't run? Higher compression is not bad for boost. It's good for boost as long as you have enough octane. You can't have high compression and high boost and low octane. You can't run it on 91 or 89 or 87 octane. You have to have good fuel in it. Oh, the 301 ports are different. But can't we, if we put a different head on it, would that make any difference? Will that motor accept the other heads and then we don't care about the intake and stuff anymore? Then we just put a conventional intake on it and blow through it with a turbo? Jeff, I don't know. Did you guys dyno yours? Yeah, that's okay, Patrick. That's what I was thinking. If you did, if you put Edelbrock heads and Edelbrock intake manifold on the 301, then you'd have much better heads. And then we just put a turbo on and blow through a blow through carburetor. Oh, the deck height's different. That would change the intake manifold. Okay, Jeff. Yeah, I haven't done mine yet either though. Ooh, a Super Duty 350. Those are cool. People ask about those on occasion. And that might have been you asking too, Patrick. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I hope you guys have a good Saturday. I am out, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Do, 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 do.